Howdy, everyone. I'm Forrest, and I have the pleasure of having Oliver here with us. Welcome to another episode of MBA Success Talks. And we're very excited to have Oliver here. He's got admittance to a lot of very interesting, successful programs here. I would love to just turn it over to Oliver quickly, intro, high level, and why you're excited to be with us.
Okay, sure. Well, I'm glad to be here because I use GMATclub a lot in my preparation, and I read a lot of the forums. There's so many questions, and really just for every bit of the application process. So it's great to be able to, contribute to that aspect. And just a high-level introduction of myself. I'm currently finishing my bachelor's in economics and business administration, mostly focused on business administration. I wouldn't call myself an economist.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, I'll be going to INSEAD, the MIM program in 2025. So this year in August. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. I imagine there's a reason for why economics is not how you consider yourself. Is it just pure enjoyment or passion in the other direction?
Mm, I guess my degree it's called economics and business administration, but I've only had two econ classes, and they were pretty like macro and micro one sort of kind of thing.
Yes.
So yeah, it's more of a it doesn't really apply. I wouldn't call myself. I feel like I would offend economists.
Yeah, don't want to get
Yeah,
them angry. I know the
exactly.
same thing at my university. We had micro and macro combined. Like it was just
Mm,
that much of not a focus in our
yeah,
business
exactly.
I appreciate that. And jumping right in, I guess the hook and why we're really excited to introduce you to more GMAT members and share your experience is that you really dived into your research on why your program is going to be so important for your path. You had that clear why, which I think is represented in all the admittance you received. And so I think to get us started here, why the MIM program? Why is it important? What's some critical factors to you?
Yeah. So the why MIM program is something you'll be asked, and probably also for MBAs, why MBA. You'll be asked in every interview. They'll ask you why do you want to do this. And for me, the answer was that the education is it's a broad education. You get a lot of different things as opposed to specializing, which means that you have a lot of opportunities to later on you can specialize if you want to, but you'll have many more doors open to you as opposed to if you're doing a master in finance. In
Mhm,
the MIM, there are some finance aspects, so you will have that ability
mhm,
to transition to that field if you would like. And it's going to be a little bit more difficult, but you do have the option. Whereas the finance one is, for example, using finance as an example, is more geared towards specifically that. And I'm interested in many things, and I believe the MIM gives the best. It's the best sort of gateway to many different possibilities. So I think that's really my answer to that question. And yeah, I think the what you mentioned about how I research the schools, I use that more. It was also using the MIM program, but I'll get into this later. But it's also researching the schools and the program and what the school was looking for, what kind of person are they targeting. So that wasn't really program specific; it was more school specific, if that
mhm.
makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah. No, I think that makes sense. I think that makes sense. The idea of flexibility when it comes to the program was most important to you when it comes to career path and career choice. And then when it came to the research component, really digging down into what those schools are looking for in that next
yeah,
cohort and using that to your advantage.
exactly.
Awesome. I guess when it comes to that, you have to sort of integrate that passion. I feel like a lot of cohorts that they're looking for at these different universities, it's all about passion. How are you going to use this opportunity and experience? What resources, and how does that going to bring you closer to what you really want to do and what you're passionate about?
Mhm.
So when it came to crafting those applications, you did research on the schools. How did you sort of integrate that narrative about what you're passionate about across those applications?
Yeah, I think that's a good question because really that's what I think is also one of the things that helped me a lot, being able to successfully integrate what is the school looking for into your applications. And it's different from every school because you get different questions and you get different ways to express it. But I think really it's about, again, looking on the school's website. If they say they're very focused on their international profile, even if they don't say it directly, but if they have like a banner that says, oh, we're 30 different nationalities or whatever,
Mhm.
because even though I'm going to INSEAD, but a lot of the other ones also brand themselves as being international focused. you can sort of see, okay, what are they trying to brand themselves on? Not it might not even say that we're looking for someone who is this, but if they do advertise whatever, like international, you can use that and see, okay, where in my experience do I have something that I can apply to that, and how can I bring it out? So it could be, for example, I said I'm in a student club or organization sort of thing, where we have some international members, and that's not something that's something that you might think, oh, I don't really have any international experience, I've never worked abroad, but maybe you've worked with people that are from abroad, and that's also some sort of exposure. So really just looking in every nook and cranny of your experience about how you can relate it to the school, even if it is something that you think, like immediately you might think, I don't think I have any of this, but you really dig, you'll be able to find something that you can latch onto that sort of thing. So I think that's really how you should do it. Try to really explore and dig deep into what you've done, because I think you'll discover that there's more things that you think.
Yeah. I think a lot of times our memory doesn't serve us very well. We think of ourselves as like this silo of stuff, and then you realize you
Yeah,
talk to people and you're like, well, I actually think about you as like this or this
yeah.
idea. Um, in that process of sort of deep diving into yourself, was there like certain people you reached out to sort of discuss, or was it more of an internal process?
I think I quickly figured out that reaching out to other people wasn't really the best approach for me, because I felt like it was more about an introspective. You had to think about yourself, be reflective. What have I learned? And I mean, some people could, like, it could be that you were in a group and you forgot that there's this international person, whatever it could be, right?
Yeah.
But usually I was looking into myself and really trying to look, okay. And that's why I did so many revisions of my essays. I'm sure we'll come to this, but it takes a lot of working. And the essays are a hard part of it, and they're also an important part, because the GMAT's important, but the essays are also very important. So for me, it was more looking introspective and trying to really uh, fine tune that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess I'd love to get an example of something that you maybe pulled from that you didn't remember, or you thought was maybe a little bit of a reach, like, oh, I don't qualify for this. But then you sort of
Mhm.
did that process and you pulled something, and you're like, oh, actually, that's a really good example.
Yeah, I think I used an example with something was like, when's the time you've overcame a difficult challenge or something like that. And I've lived in Denmark my whole life. It's a pretty good country, good social like what do you call it? Safety net sort of thing. So I've never really
Yeah.
had to worry about those very survival existential things. So I had to think about what do I do? And I found something pretty mundane, which is like my driving tests. I had a pretty
Mhm.
bad experience with that. So just looking for something mundane, but you can still pivot that into whatever challenge or whatever it might be that you overcame. Yeah, I think that was what I did. I looked, okay, what have I done that maybe for me felt like it was difficult or a challenge, even though in the big picture it might seem sort of silly. But I think the admissions, they reward that you are introspective and you can realize that even though you've not had like maybe a survival challenge or whatever it was,
Yeah.
you still have had to overcome something or had some different feelings that you have to reflect about, and it shows that you're able to think on those deeper levels.
Yeah. And I think it also goes to show creativity. Like a lot of times they're like, oh, everyone's going the same path. You go a different path. It connects personally as well. And they see
Yeah,
like, oh, they're actually adapting to kind of the challenge we threw at them. And they made it personal.
yeah.
So I think that's a great way to go about it. Um, Speaking of the admissions process, what was sort of like a critical phase in it? Like, was it like the essay preparation? Was it the interview prep? In your admissions process, what really
Mhm.
was a critical factor for you and for the admin team, if you got any feedback from them on, what was the deciding factor for them?
Yeah. Well, I didn't get any specific feedback from the admin team. It was mostly just that I had a good profile. But really, the thing that was the biggest thing for me was the GMAT preparation. There's something I really struggled with. I actually did a lot of it in this room, so
Mhm.
it's bringing back some memories.
Yeah.
But that was a big thing for me because I took my first practice test in. Well, I did like a mini practice test on one of the school's websites back in March or something when I was first starting to research schools,
Mhm.
and I scored like an average score that was like 545, but that was like not a full test.
Yeah.
And then I went on to do a full practice test in June, right when I finished my exams,
Mhm.
and I had a big summer vacation. So here we have 8 weeks, which because I'm a uni student, so we get a little bit more,
Mhm.
well, a lot more. So I knew that I had some time to try and practice the GMAT. I had some acquaintances that had done it before, so I just decided to, I'm going to go ahead and do it. And I really didn't think I prepared well enough, and that was a big hurdle for me in admission. It was also something that I struggled with after because I got a 615, which is it's an okay score. It's like a 670, 680 around there on the on the old GMAT,
Mhm.
but it's not an exceptional score. And I was also doubting if I would be able to get into the programs. And I was also doubting, do I have to do a retake? And I was
Mhm.
going on an exchange program at that time, so there's a few things going around. But really, the GMAT preparation was a big thing for me because, yeah, I feel like I should have prepared more structured. Um, yeah, that was the biggest thing for me.
Yeah, I think it's very nerve wracking because a lot of times we think like, well, I can't really control the qualitative, like at my
Mm.
essays, it's, up to interpretation, but the GMAT score, I think we get really stuck up on like, this is the range that they need people to be
Yeah,
in. I need to be on the upper end for them to even think
yeah.
about me. And so it's good to hear that GMAT Club was a helpful resource in doing a little bit of prep work.
Mm.
And, you kind of just dove into that research, I think helped create that impressive profile comprehensively. When it comes to test day, was there anything in particular that sort of helped you settle your nerves, or maybe after, when thinking like, oh, maybe that's not a good score, something that you sort of told yourself to help you like
Mhm.
push through when it came to applications?
Okay, yeah. So specifically, just to answer your question about test day, I think before exams, I'm quite lucky because I get nervous before, but then during, I sort of get in the zone, sort of focus. I
Mhm.
think what's also like a fun representation of that is my practice tests. I did 5 practice tests, and I got the first one in June. I got 545,
Mhm.
with like, what I get, 70 quant, so that's like 14th percentile. I was really
Mhm.
shocked. I was like, whoa, because I'm pretty good. I thought I was pretty good at math, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I had like advanced statistics. I got A's and stuff, but I was like, whoa, okay. It really hits you hard because you think,
Mhm.
am I just an idiot?
You're just like,
But
I
then,
am dumb. I'm sorry.
yeah, exactly. That's what you start thinking. You start doubting yourself. I
Mhm.
think also pushing through that is a bit of it's a resilience test for sure. I think the admission also know that. That's why they can be lenient on a GMAT score. They know it's a lot of work.
Mhm.
But yeah, in regards to test day, sorry, I don't think that was something that really annoyed me going to the test center because I did it at the test center. I didn't do it online,
Mhm.
and it was in a city I know, so I'd been there before, so everything was sort of cool around there. Whole process was fine, and then actually I got a 545 in my first one, as I said, and then I only got 585s for the next 4 tests over 2 months. So that was really like 3 days before my exam. I did a practice test. I got five. I think it was 585 again. I was like,
Mhm.
oh no, this is not going to go well. But then I thought, I'd already booked the test. If I cancel now, I'll only get half the fee. I have other stuff to do afterwards. So then I went ahead with it and I got a 615, which is 30 points above my practice test. Which there might be some aspect of luck, but I also feel like there is some aspect of you prepared for this. Your body sort
Mhm.
of knows now it's time to perform. At least that's how it is for me. So, but
Yeah.
afterwards, I wasn't out because I only got 615, which is actually below the average admit at 4 of the schools. I think ESSEC is like maybe 605 is the equivalent now, but
Mhm.
all the other ones is actually below. They all have 645, 635. So I was a bit worried about that, but I did reach out to sort of settle my nerves. I did two things. So I reached out to both admission consultants, like independent ones, or some programs and stuff, and then the actual schools, people that work in admissions. But you can find them on LinkedIn and maybe on their website sometimes. You can just go whatever ESSEC, MiM, admission team, LinkedIn, and then you'll find someone.
Mhm.
It's like just networking.
Yeah.
So I recommend doing that if you are in doubt about your score. They will tell you, do you need to give to take the test again, or will they say, you'll probably be fine with this score. Me, they told I sent them my CV and they said you'd probably be fine. So that helped. And then to get that extra sort of confirmation in regards to the score, I also, as I said, reached out to some consultants, and they were like, this probably is not going to be what's holding you back. And then my nerves sort of cooled down and I decided not to do the test again. So I think if you're in doubt, reach out to some sources that can give you a credible review of your score. Is it realistic given your profile? And then take it from there. I think that's what I did.
Yeah. And I'm sure it felt good to reach out to people and then sort of confirm. It's like, hey, like, we know it's a stressful process.
Yeah.
Everyone goes through it. And for them to like see your background or a little preview and just be like, yeah, like, you know, we'd encourage you to apply as a good start. When it comes to transitioning, you go from test, now you're going into applications and essays. What was kind of a sort of your essay writing process? Like, did you sort of tackle them all at once? Did you divide them up? What was your, you know, process behind it?
Yeah. So the essays were a bit different for me because I think a lot of people split it up where they do, as you mentioned, first GMAT and then essays. I actually did the essays, my final versions I did after. So I did revisions up until 2 days before I submitted application. And I actually changed them quite radically in the end. But I think, sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, just behind, it's all good. Behind
behind
your
the
essay
essay.
writing process, like,
Yeah.
how did you go about doing it? Like, do you consider yourself a great writer? If so, like, how does that play into your process? If you think like you needed an editor, like, how did you go about getting to your final copy?
Okay, yeah, sorry. Got a bit
No worries.
sidetracked there. Yeah, so I actually started my essays before the GMAT, and I sort of looked at them during, because INSEAD opened their portal like 3 or 4 months before the actual deadline, which is rare. I knew some of the other schools opened them only 1 month before, but that meant that I had the ability to come up with some stories and sort of what kind of things do I want to say, and then I could reuse that in the other schools.
Yeah.
Well, some of it. It's not directly applicable. I would be careful if you just copy paste one thing, because usually you're not going to answer the question exactly. It's important to know that you actually have to answer what they're asking you. But my writing process was really disjointed. It wasn't really one thing where I sat down and said, okay, now I'm going to write the essays, which I think you could do. But for me, it was a lot of revision. It was a lot of writing this and okay, that looks good. And then you can come back to it in 3-4 days and you say, okay, maybe that's weak. Maybe that's not quite answering the question. So for me, it was a lot of revision. And in the end, I thought I can't do it better than this. That was like 2 days before the what I had to send my application. So yeah, it was erratic process, you might say.
Yeah, but it definitely seemed like, you know, give yourself time. You know, don't feel like you have to chew it all off at once, and you know, just keep going back through. Just like, is it better? Is it better? Is it better? And then you'll get to that point where it's just like, I don't know if I can even look at it anymore. It's as good as I can produce.
Yeah, and then I think when you get tired of it, you might want to have someone else read it and say that's also an input. Something I use is having people that know you. But you can't. I mean, you could ask just talk to strangers, but they'll say, "How does this sound?" It sounds weird. But maybe if you talk to someone that actually knows you a lot, they'll say, maybe you could write this in another way. This isn't quite representative of you. And the more personal it is, the more you'll also be able to relate to it and talk about it in your interview if you do get to the interview stage. So I think that's why it's important to not use you can use AI, but I would only use it for like editing or like spotting grammatical errors if you're not the greatest at that. I think that's totally fine. But I would really, really be careful with trying to automate it or be, okay, answer this question for me, because it doesn't know you. And that's why you have to do the revisions and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very important note. You know, there's a lot of tools out there. Don't depend on them. Use them as, you know, guidance. You know, you're like, hey, like, I've looked at this so many times. All the lines are blurred together. You know, this sentence looks wrong. Can you give me guidance? And definitely reach out to people who know you or maybe know of the story, and then they can add more details that, you know, you don't recall, or that more customize it to you and answer that question stronger. And I guess leading into that, how did it play into the interview process? Like, was there a lot directed towards expanding on your essays, personal experience, or was it, you know, away from what your essays were about?
I think the interviews, they really varied by school. You know, I got into 5 schools, interviewed with all 5, and they were completely different. There's none of them were similar at all. I started with the first interview I had was ESSEC. It was a very, very typical Spanish style, I'd say, because the guy was like 20 minutes late, just sitting in his office with like his phone, really a weird angle. I was like, what's happening here? It was great school. And this guy's
Is this the wrong link? Am I
yeah.
in the wrong
But I mean, I guess, yeah, he said, I'll be 10 minutes late. And then 15 minutes after those 10 minutes, he came. So I guess, which, I mean, that sort of did help cool the nerves because you're like, oh, I'm just waiting. But yeah, the interviews are very different. That guy just asked me some standard questions. Sometimes it'll feel like they're reading from a board, like, how do you feel about this? What are you in a team? Stuff like that. Like it'll feel very checklisty. And other ones, for example, HEC, I got into the strategic management program where they actually focused a lot on my motivation, which I wrote in my essays. Something that's strange if you do choose to apply to HEC. This might be for the MBA, so I'm not sure if this applies, but if you're applying to another master, you can actually apply to 2 programs at once. So if you don't get into round 1, you'll automatically apply to round 2 with your other one. And they actually used some content I wrote in the essays for my second priority in my first priority interview, which I wasn't really prepared for because I'd only really reread my first priority stories. So I just be prepared for whatever you've put in your application, they can bring up. But specifically something like HEC, they were very technical. They asked me a question like, what do you think is a strategic decision? I had to think on my feet being, what does that even mean? I think it's really important to be able to just take a step back and actually hear what the interviewer is asking you, like I just didn't before. Yeah, and so it really depends. It also depends how many people there are, because INSEAD they do alumni interviews, where there's only 1 person. For MBAs, I believe they have 2 interviews. MIM only has 1. HEC was 2 people. LBS was another alumni, actually current student. ESSEC was some admissions guy, and ESSEC was 1 previous professor, 1 current, and 1 student. So 3 people.
Wow.
So yeah, I guess it's all up to whatever the school is. So be prepared for anything is really, they'll ask into everything.
Yeah, anything you give them is on the table. So just be prepared and be yourself. It seems like is the key to that.
Exactly.
Because of the variance in the different types of interviews, did that play at all into how you made your decisions, like the feelings you got from the interview or the type of interview they had on where you finally ended up going?
Actually, that's a good question. I think it could have if I wasn't so set on INSEAD. I think HEC's interview actually played a little bit against them in my sort of decision because they were very academic focused, which is fine, but it felt very stringent and strict. But where INSEAD was very laid back, the other ones were also pretty laid back, I'd say. But it wasn't a big deciding factor for me. But I think it could be if you're stuck between 2 great schools or whatever. It might be a factor. But I think it's also hard to put all that weight of that decision on that single thing because this person might have had a long day, they might be tired. So I think you should be careful about judging everything on the interview. But you can maybe get a sense of what the school's culture is like. Yeah.
It can definitely be an additive factor, but there's also situations that cause it to be different for everyone.
Yeah.
I guess going back to the whole profile, we've covered the interview, we covered the essays, we covered the tests. When it comes to recommendations, do you think that was a critical part? How did you go about choosing them? And I guess, did your recommenders tell you, like, did they get reached out to? How did that conversation go?
I think this also depends on the school because HEC, you can send a PDF, a pre-written one, where most of the other ones you couldn't. I actually got a special, I got allowed by ESSEC to send them from a PDF because otherwise there was some deadline or something I couldn't reach. I know they have rolling deadlines, but there was something. It was because I was going to submit all my applications at once, and they'd actually reached out to me, saying because I started filling out my application, and they called me saying, "Hey, you want to finish it?" So I said, "Okay, I can, but I want to send them at once because I want to have my results at once."
Yeah.
So I said, "I can't reach out to these people again because it'd be bringing up some old stuff.
Yeah.
So can you accept these PDFs?" And they said, "Okay, we'll make an exception." Because they did have their signatures and everything on them. So schools can also be quite flexible, which is something I learned. I mean, they're in control of the entire process. And if there's some request that you think you might have to make, or you want to make, you can always ask them. The worst they'll say is no. So yeah, but I'm just thinking. Yeah, I think that's about it.
Yeah. I guess for me, in my application process, there was a lot of me sort of like prompting them to highlight certain things in like work projects, like certain skills. Was that a conversation you had with your recommenders on trying to focus on certain things, and how'd that go?
Yeah, I think because this also depends on what the schools want. Some of
Mhm.
them want one professor, one professional. Some of them have a preference toward maybe academic, and some of them have a preference toward professional. So it
Mhm.
also depends what kind of relationship you have with that person. So INSEAD only want professional. They wanted two professional recommendations. So what I actually did was I sent both. I had two direct bosses.
Mhm.
So I work in a pension fund as like an investment analyst. It's a part-time because we do in Denmark. Sorry, going off a bit of a tangent, but it requires some explanation. In
Yeah.
Denmark, we do, instead of internships full-time during the summer, usually this is the norm, is that you do a part-time job while studying instead.
Okay.
So you work 15 hours a week, sort of something like that. Anyway, so that's where I got those two recommendations from, and I sent them an email saying,
Mhm.
"Hey, I'm applying to this program. This is what they're looking for." Because in the INSEAD application guide, it says
Mhm.
something about recommendations, and it says we're trying to see what this person has a potential for senior management. So I just highlighted that in yellow, but what the school
Yeah.
is actually saying, because there might be something on the website that says this is what we want your recommenders to say, and I definitely try to look for that and try to include that.
Mhm.
But otherwise, I say try to focus on what makes you potential for management, and
Mhm.
what are some of your strengths? How are you in a team? Because these are the sort of things I think they're going to ask for. The thing is, I never saw the recommendation portal. You send 5 or 10 links. You send to 2 people every time. Usually, LBS
Yeah.
actually only have one. But it's and I don't know what they look like. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I usually ask them to fill out some stuff about how you are in a working environment, and then maybe something about how you are as a person.
Yeah.
And it was professional, so my two bosses, and then one professor. That was a little bit strange because in Denmark we don't really have a close relationship with a professor. I know it varies country by country,
Mhm.
but I did have a course where I had 4 exams, and I got like a high grade in all of them. So I wrote
Mhm.
him and saying, "Hey, I'm applying for these programs," and he understood, and he sent me a written one, and said that I could send him a link. So that was very nice of him. But I'd reach out early because it can take some time, and maybe they missed the email. Maybe you have to resend it like 2 weeks later. So I wouldn't wait to the last second. I definitely get on the recommendations early because it can also take some time. One of my bosses filled out the LBS one like 6 hours before it was due. So I recommend reaching out early. I had sent it to him. He was just yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
it's always like, "Oh, yeah, I'll do that," and then it's, like, a couple months later, and you're like, "I haven't received anything." It's like,
so are you gonna do it or yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
No,
they're always like, "Oh, I was working on that."
sure. Yeah, I think that's the thing. That's what I'd say in regards to recommendations.
Awesome. So it seems like a lot of just, like, understanding what that program does. Like, for IM, it's like, how are you gonna be as a manager? And, like, what's the work experience? What have you already demonstrated that would make you good for where this path will lead someone?
Mhm.
And I guess this is a good transition. You studied really well. You made a complete profile. You had a vision for why MIM. What's sort of the post goals short term after the program, and then maybe 5, 10 years down the line, what you hope to do with it?
Yeah. So after the program, I'll be starting an internship. Actually, I
Hmm.
just mentioned we don't do them, but the
Yeah.
only companies that do them here are MBB. So I'll be starting
Okay.
an MBB internship. Um, and then I'm hoping to convert that to a full-time offer. So if
Hmm.
I'm lucky, I'll be able to come back next year
Hmm.
afterwards, and then so that's gonna be the short term after the program. Gain some good knowledge, nice experiences, connections, stuff like that. And then looking further down the line, I'd like to go abroad, go to another country, maybe use the connections you've made at the school, and try to do whatever. Because I feel like consulting opens a lot of doors. So
Yeah.
I don't really know yet. Maybe I'll stay in consulting. I'm not sure.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Awesome. I guess outside of maybe professional, how do you hope the MIM program or the connections it provides will sort of complete you outside of the professional realm, whether that's like volunteer or just extracurricular?
Oh, so in the program?
Yeah, inside the program, and then how that'll transition once you graduate.
Okay. So I think for me, it's going to be a lot about personal connections.
Hmm.
I'm someone that loves exploring different cultures.
Hmm.
So I'm a big foodie. I love all this kind of stuff. I love languages. So really being able to meet so many different types of people, which you're going to get in most programs, because as I mentioned, a lot of them brand themselves on being international. I think INSEAD especially is very internationally focused. But I'm really hoping to gain some valuable connections and friendships as well, and hoping to get on a personal side because it's a big thing being able to explore so many different things and see the world. So that's really what I'm a big thing I'm hoping to gain.
Yeah. No, it's a brilliant opportunity to grow not only as a professional but also as a person with the connections and the experiences you'll have. I
Mm.
guess kind of to close off, we've talked a lot about how you've gotten to where you are today. Congrats on your admittance. What's advice that you could share with others beyond what we've already talked about?
Yeah, so I actually wrote down a little note here.
Mhm.
So I'm just gonna read this. Yeah, okay. So I said really just be honest about your experience and really try to apply that to what the school is looking for.
Mhm.
Because they're not looking to if you get like a decline or what do you call it? If you get dinged,
Yeah,
is
rejection, if you
a
will.
rejection, yeah. Sorry,
Yeah.
that's the word I was looking for. You might take the personal. They're not. It's not personal. They're trying to find a student that fits what the image of their school is.
Mhm.
So really try to look at what is the school looking for and what kind of thing do you have it. Because I promise you'll have something that you didn't think of
Mhm.
immediately. I know I did, and that's why the revisions of the essays helped me a lot because I had a lot of time to think about it. And
Mhm.
then research your school heavily and use that in your application and your interviews. There's many ways of research. It can also be like it can be, oh, our vision is this. Sure, that's one thing, but it can also be courses. Is there a specific course that you find interesting, and you can relate to your current experience? Maybe you have work in finance, and there's a valuation course. You think, oh, this would be great for me. You can write that, or you can say it in an interview. Maybe there's an elective, which is something that builds upon something you've done or maybe you want to explore. So really showing that you've done your research. It can also be different initiatives they have or different clubs. I mentioned student clubs quite a bit because I'm interested in consulting. I also like wine, and most schools have a wine club, and
Yeah.
that's something interviewers find sort of interesting.
Mhm.
So yeah, really just try to figure out what the school is all about, and then list down all the things that you find interesting about it, because then it'll come naturally to you. What do I actually find interesting, and what have I done that's relevant to this? And then you can build upon that. So that would be my biggest recommendation.
Awesome. No, I think that that is a perfect way to close it off, Oliver. I appreciate you making times for us, and I appreciate everyone for tuning in for another
Thank you for
MBA
having me.
Success Talks here. Awesome. Well, we'll see you on the forums, Oliver, and we'll be excited to follow your journey beyond.
Yeah. See you.
See you.